Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on dungeon mastering.
And I'm one of your hosts, DM Neal, aka Jote Maniac. I feel like I might not be all the way under the weather like I have been for far too long, but here we are, and today we're going to be bringing you an episode all about teaching the next generation of D&D players. And I have the absolute pleasure of having none other than Jim Zub back on to the podcast where we talk about all things that have to do with introducing the next gen, which is relevant to age. It's just the new set of players and some of the ways that we can go about that, some of the ways that we remember going about it, some of the ways we remember being that next generation, and just a good discussion about all of that. But that's enough of me talking, so let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meat?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys.
So today for the meat, we have a returning guest, a personal favorite of mine. We have Jim Zub, writer, artist, and art instructor who no doubt has something on your shelf with his name on it, whether it's a D&D comic, a D&D book, or one of my personal favorite comics, Skull Kickers. Jim, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me. It is good to be back and good to, have my stuff on your shelf. I love hearing that from so many people. It is a joy to be able to do this. And I get to work on comics and games and all my favorite stuff. So it could not be better. Yeah,
you're checking off just about every nerdy box that I could think of. And the most recent one that was it's right here. So let's not act like I can't just read. The Dungeons and Dragons Tales from the Table, a campaign archive for Stranger Things. So I was almost all the way through it before I realized that you had a hand in it. So that was very funny to me.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. My wife and I, we did that book for the Stranger Things final season. We put together this book that is essentially like all the campaign notes or a bunch of notes between the kids as they're playing through the D&D games that you see both on and off the episodes, in between episodes. I'd previously co-written with Jody Hauser, the Stranger Things Dungeons and Dragons graphic novel that shows how the group came together and how the kids start playing D&D together, got their first D&D set, how Dustin joins the party, all that kind of stuff. And so I was already kind of immersed in all those things. And then, Random House came back to us with this really funky project where they wanted it to be kind of like those notes and all those materials from that time that would have been put together, the character sheets and the questions about the rules. And that's the same era of D&D that my brother and I grew up playing. So it was a real nostalgia bomb to be able to go back through that stuff and really dig in deep. And in some cases, that feeling of full circle, like you're talking about the stuff that you did back then, or you're misinterpreting the rules, or you're having those crazy questions, because that's what it was like to play D&D when you're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old in the 80s. It was a totally different time. You couldn't just go to the internet and look up an answer or see YouTube videos of people arguing about all the salient points, So
yeah, I remember definitely doing rules wrong, and then someone joining the table. And then they having years of doing it a different way. And so you're having quite the heated argument of, no, this is how it's done.
Yeah. The first D&D books that my brother and I had, we had the expert set, and then we had the advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. And we didn't fully understand that these were, they're both Dungeons and Dragons, right? So the idea that advanced was that different to us didn't make sense. And even when you look in like the original DMG, it's not an incredibly well-organized read. There's a lot of meandering kind of crazy stuff in that book. There's amazing stuff. There's gold in Demdar Hills, obviously, but it's a fascinating thing. And my poor, 12-year-old brother trying to discern this stuff and make heads or tails of it, plus the modules and all the other stuff and just our own kooky ideas at the table. It was an amazing and creative time for sure.
Yeah. The BCEMI, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I have a full, really, really nice set of those.
Amazing.
That I look at. I don't really touch much.
Yeah, I've got all the stuff. I got a full set of first edition, both the Beck Me, and I've also got all the advanced stuff. Throughout the lockdowns, I finished my set of every module from AD&D and stuff like that. So my collection is just kind of off camera, and it is pretty monstrous. And the nice thing about doing this professionally is that I can say, oh no, I have to have this for work, so it's good to have as a reference material. Sure.
Perfect. Yeah. And yeah, for anyone that hasn't picked this up, it is certainly a nostalgia bomb. I did kind of a breakdown of it in a previous episode, but the things that, and what, we could probably get into it a little bit more as further in the episode. So let's do our brief interview. So since last time, which was 2021, which is far too long. That is far too long. Shame on me. No, but so what have you been up to since 2021? I mean, probably nothing. Sure,
nothing. Just a ton of different books. The Young Adventurers Guide series is continuing on, and we're going to chat about that quite a bit. I'm doing a lot of comic book writing. I since then relaunched Conan the Barbarian at Titan, and that has become kind of the biggest part of my current creative career. I'm the flagship writer for Conan the Barbarian. I've signed a long-term contract, and I'm building out this epic mythic story, both in the monthly titles, a series of event books that we're doing every year. And we brought back the classic anthology series, Savage Sword of Conan. And so getting to work on that is just amazing. Conan is the original sword and sorcery hero. The character's been around longer than Superman, and the fan base is generational. And so being at the kind of sharp tip of the spear on all that is really exciting and amazing. It's doing incredibly well, and it's really transformed kind of my writing career. A lot of people who may have known my name on other stuff, sort of come on board, and other people who were lapsed, Conan readers have come in the door. I'm still doing stuff with D&D. I'm not doing the D&D comics at this time. The license switched over to Dark Horse, so they've got a new set of creative teams, but I'm still involved with the D&D brand, obviously, doing all kinds of related license stuff and working away on the Young Adventurers, the little book series that would not quit. My wife and I joke around. We're currently working on book 9 and 10 of a 3-book series. So it's doing just incredibly well.
Yeah, because I remember, first and foremost, that has to be, this is me knowing a little bit more about the comic scene than probably your average reader. That contract has to feel real good.
It's amazing.
Because that's typically not how modern contracts go.
No. Most of the modern books, 6 and 12 months at a time is the norm. Yeah. And so I had a 12-month commitment. And then as soon as the book relaunched, it did so well that they signed me on for essentially like 4 years. And so I'm plugging away. Yeah. I'll be on the book till at least end of 2027 and maybe beyond. We'll see how that all goes. But right now, it's just been an incredible experience. We've got just the best team of artists, my editors, everyone involved has just been phenomenal.
Yeah. And I remember talking to you early in the Young Adventurers Guide days and the first 3 books. And I don't think I ever said this directly to your face, but now that we're this far into the books, I'm happy to say this. When you were like, oh, I think we're only going to have 3. All I could think in my heart was like, that sucks. But like, obviously that didn't need to be said at that time, but because of what they were, what they did, and what I knew they could do, and that that's going to transition us into like the rest of this conversation.
Totally.
But speaking of, is there anything that you're currently working on? And and believe you me, I know this is going to certainly apply to you, that you can tell us about.
There is stuff I can't say that I'm working away on. We are doing more Young Adventurers books, as I mentioned, although the titles haven't been announced yet. I've got more comic book stuff on the go. I've got a creator-owned comic series I'm hoping we're going to launch by end of the year, but that has also not been announced. But Skull Kickers is back in print. So Oni Press did a series of what they call compact editions that have just come out. So they're called the Compact Attack editions of Skull Kickers. So it's amazing to have my original kind of creator-owned sword and sorcery series back in print, and a whole new generation of readers who may have come on board through my D&D stuff or my Marvel superhero stuff, or now at Conan the Barbarian, now can kind of go back and go, oh, this is where that, kind of started. This is where it all kind of kicked into gear. So it's, it's been amazing to have those back on shelves, and a whole new generation of readers picking them up and getting excited and being like, oh, this guy's really funny or fun, or, because the D&D stuff sort of splits the difference. It's got, it's pathos and it's high magic and fantasy, but it's also, a lot of fun. And this Conan stuff's a lot more kind of serious, lyrical, gravitas, classic sword and sorcery. So it's nice to sort of show that range, I love all the magic stuff. I love all the fantasy stuff I can get my hands on, but I can kind of, different approaches depending on what kind of story I want to tell.
Well, and I have them in hand, and I'm a big fan because I can actually read Skull Kickers in hand again, because I don't really touch my set of Skull Kickers that I got when they were originally coming out, because that's the collector in me. That's not really what I'm going to do with them.
Totally.
I have like issue 1 in like in the slab sign, that kind of thing. So like I'm not, obviously I'm not cracking that thing open just to be like, oh, let's read issue 1 again. So it's just nice to have a physical copy to be able to read again.
Absolutely.
And then it's also nice to have my kid, because my kid's getting old enough that to be able to have him have a copy that he can read as well.
Perfect. I love to hear that. Yeah, it really was sort of built for like the 8 to 10-year-old in me. That was, it was that mentality of playing old school D&D. It's funny, the Stranger Things, stuff just keeps coming around. It's that era when it was just the idea of dungeon delving and kicking butt, and in some ways breaking the rules of what heroes were supposed to do. That's what D&D was when I was a kid. We were these morally compromised troublemakers, going through adventures and storming our way through dungeons and kicking skeletons in the face and gathering treasure and having fun. And that's what a lot of, kind of Skull Kickers represents to me, for sure.
Yeah. So for our surprise question, since we've talked a lot about comics, and I don't think I've ever kind of picked your brain on this particular topic, like what are like some of your early comic memories, like comic book memories?
That's a good question. I mean, the earliest comics I collected, other than whatever, reading stuff in the newspaper, Garfield,
for sure,
and Calvin and Hobbes, stuff like that. But like the earliest stuff that I collected was the G.I. Joe comics. So my brother and I had separate kind of toy collections because my parents didn't want us to argue. So my brother had Star Wars toys and he would get the Star Wars comics. And then I would get G.I. Joe and I would get the G.I. Joe comics. And that eventually led us both to kind of the Marvel universe, because obviously there were always ads running in those books. And we started to collect all kinds of different Marvel superhero stuff. I became obsessed with Spider-Man and everything kind of related to that. My brother got obsessed with the X-Men, but we would share each other's books and read everything. And then the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, that was the thing that really like flipped the switch in our minds, because back then you didn't have easy access to older stories. You couldn't just read the original, origins of these heroes and characters. You didn't have the trade paperback programs like you do now, let alone digital archives. And so you would hear about the origin of a character, or you would hear about the early stories in flashback little panels or things like that. And getting that handbook of the Marvel Universe, like an encyclopedia that had all the characters in it, organized them. And it was written in a way that made it sound like it was one constant cohesive story. Now, obviously, there were dozens and dozens of writers and, artists that were contributing to all those stories over the decades. But they did a great job at forging it together to make it seem like it all made sense. Probably way more so than it did issue by issue and year by year. Yeah. But for us, because that was our reference material, it was like, oh, that is the archive. That is like if your character was in the Book of the Dead, they were dead, because they were in the encyclopedia that said that guy's dead, or if this was their first appearance, or if this is how they all related together. And so we just obsessed over the mass of it, how it all connected together and how these pieces all sort of fit and how these characters all knew each other and all that kind of stuff. It was just endless kind of discussion fodder for us. And it fed into that, that age that you hit where you're trying to find the limits of your world, or you obsess over something. Some kids, obsess over sports, and some kids obsess over video games, and some kids obsess over whatever. But there's usually that kind of formative age. And for us, it was like Dungeons and Dragons and monsters and those worlds and the Marvel Universe. And those two things were just like so formative to us in that way. My brother would go on to read tons of sci-fi and sword and sorcery novels. And because he was 4 years older than me and I kind of obsessed over wanting to be like him, I was always, the whatever hand-me-downs. If he really, really liked the book, then I would read it as soon as he finished it. And I just kept gravitating more to the sword and sorcery than the sci-fi stuff. I would read some of them, but I was like, they didn't do as much for me. And I just realized, no, the ones with the gritty, grim ass kickery and the, fantasy worlds and magic and monsters, that was the stuff that really, really did it for me.
I love that answer because I feel like the encyclopedias don't get enough shout out and love just because it teaches people about characters that are like, really get into the C&D list, but then, maybe you find something that speaks to you that otherwise wouldn't, because maybe you just don't see yourself in the A-list character just because they're doing so much. But you see yourself in it, one of the nope, I'm not doing lesser. I was going to say lesser, but I hate that word. I know. Didn't like.
I feel like any Marvel character, if they're made well, like I think any character, any fictional character you can explore and you can go deeper with if you find the right angle on them.
With all the modern stuff, because you think of like where was Iron Man pre 2008?
Exactly right. He would have been considered. Yeah, he would have been considered a B-lister or a C-lister, but it doesn't really matter. Now everyone's got a favorite. Everyone's character is someone's favorite. And I think what's also neat about that as well, for me, when I started working on Marvel stuff officially, sure, you've got the wiki that fans have put together, and it's an exhaustive, incredible archive. It's amazing, and it's always up to date. Like I would create stuff in the Marvel Universe, and a couple days later, it would be on that wiki, and you're just like, damn, that thing is potent.
Yeah.
But the browsability is a lot more difficult. Unless you know what you're looking for and you're hunting it specifically, it's a lot harder to just kind of stumble across. You can endlessly read articles, but it's a lot harder there's so much material and it's all cross-linked in a way that's kind of just this overwhelming tapestry. And what I love doing now in the Marvel Universe is I'll go back to those books. I've still got them. And I flip through, and it's not that is a reference material that's current, because that, stuff is 40 years old, all the data that's in there. But what it'll do is it'll remind me of a character, and I'll go, oh, whatever happened to that guy? And then I look up their current paradigm or whatever happened to them or that team or that particular era. And that leads me down a cool rabbit hole to start brainstorming and go, oh, it would be fun if we could hook up with those characters now, or if I can link that to something else, or just things like that I think are really fun to do in a shared universe like the Marvel Universe. Same kind of thing with the D&D stuff. You look at, oh, okay, I've got a ton of the old modules, and you're just like, oh, that's one that people haven't really tapped into. Or what if we brought back that funky little item, or what was really neat and unique about that particular location? Even if I'm not going to use it wholesale, it can just germinate more and more cool ideas in whatever I'm doing right now.
Yeah. I forgot. I was supposed to answer the question as well. For whatever reason, I focused solely in my early comic days just on Wolverine. That's all I did.
One guy. Nice.
Yeah. I don't, and like looking like in retrospect.
But what era did you start reading in then? So what?
Oh, I went back. Even though it was technically before my time, I went back. Like I went back to like the earliest stuff, and then caught myself up, and then just kept only reading Wolverine. I would then, like when there were crossovers, I would purchase the crossovers to get the full story. But other than that, I would just be like, oh, okay. And then like not buy them again. For whatever reason, as a child, it would not sell me on purchasing that title further. I'd be like, okay, well, he's in there, so then I should read that a little bit. Yeah.
So it must be important. That's so funny. Speaking specifically of Wolverine, like I read Wolverine stuff and he was in the X-Men and everything else. And then a few years ago, Marvel hired me to do this digital first miniseries that they put together called Life of Wolverine. And so I worked with editor Mark Basso and Drew Baumgartner, and man, we went through over 300 issues of Wolverine comics, trying to sort of pick the high points and decide how we were going to represent this character to everybody. And it was both wonderful and terrible because there's just so much material, and there's stories you really, really remember. And then there's ones that were just like, where the hell did this come from? I don't even remember this entire section of stories and trying to pick like one or two panels out and go, okay, that's super important, or that comes back later, or realizing exactly that I would read something later on and I would go, oh, they're tying in all this older stuff that I didn't think would be important. And now it's important again. And so I now know way more about Wolverine than I ever wanted to. It's amazing, but also like I've probably permanently scarred a part of my brain with Logan lore while doing that book.
As a reader, yes. 100% correct.
Yeah.
There were times where I was like, oh no. Okay. We'll get through this together. It'll be okay. But yeah, so the topic at hand, and we've definitely alluded to it a lot, is the idea, and I'm actively doing it, and you are actively doing it as well. I'm actively doing it because they live in my house. But the idea for this episode's topic is that the teaching the next generation.
Right. Bringing them in the door.
Yeah. And one of the things that, because, you know, we're well into the 300s for our episodes. One of the things that I always like asking to kind of start the conversation is like, what drew you to this topic? Like, you've got a lot that you're actively doing for it, but like, what puts it on your heart and mind for this topic?
I mean, the simple truth is that when I was 8 years old, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it unlocked a creative desire to create, not just passively receive entertainment, right? So instead of reading books and watching movies, I was actively creating stuff. I was creating art and I was creating stories and I was building with my friends and with my family, like great memories and stories that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. And it made me a more creative person. And I can't really envision a version of myself as the writer that I am and as the creator that I am without role-playing games, without that engagement and that feedback loop of we're doing a thing, we're rolling the dice, we're having fun, we're describing, we're heading off into the unknown, and we're going to make this thing together, and we don't know where it's going to go. The Dungeon Master doesn't have 100% control of it, and I don't have 100% control of it. The dice have their own, sort of role to play in all this, and together we're going to find something cool and neat together. That's what makes it so special. And so I want more people to have that experience. I want more people to understand how amazing it is, how creatively fulfilling it is, how enjoyable it is, to realize that they're more creative than they may even know, or to just be able to tap into that and then run with it.
Yeah, the idea that also I come to a lot is that you self-insert. Like you always will. No matter how much you think you're not doing it, you are. It's just what percentage are you doing it really is what it boils down to. But you're always putting some element of yourself into it. And with doing that is you're engaging with that at the table. And so the degree to which that helps you process your own life is really interesting.
I became a more confident person because of D&D as a public speaker, as there would be, characters that I would be playing in games, and they would be more confident and wittier and more spontaneous than I ever felt like I could be. And then when I left high school and I went off to college, I realized I didn't want to be as shy. I didn't want to be as kind of scared. And it was like, okay, I'm going to be those people that I have wanted to be, or I'm going to be more of those things that I have shown I can be. You know what I mean? And it's almost like fake it till you make it on this broader kind of scale.
Yeah. I mean, hearkening back to Stranger Things in season 5, I mean, there's an example of that. I mean, if you haven't watched it, I mean, I guess I won't go all the way into the spoilers, but you should totally watch it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's examples of that. And I also think sometimes this is the safest place, having the right table also ends up being like one of the safer places for people to be themselves. And express themselves in certain ways that otherwise they don't feel comfortable doing so. Or just try stuff out. Be weird. I know I have.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the weirdest I ever be is when I'm at a table.
Well, and the joy that can come with doing that sort of thing, and the consequences are within the scope of the narrative, as you sort of said, that we can do a thing and push outside of ourselves, and then realize, I get one of the best descriptions I heard. Sly Flourish, he had a great episode where he was talking about the dichotomy of role-playing games. It's a really big deal. You get to be this creative person. You get to make big choices. You get to spend all this quality time with some of your favorite people and make memories for a lifetime. And so role-playing games are important, but you also need to hold in your hand the idea it's just a game. We're having fun. We're rolling dice. It's just about entertaining ourselves and doing this for the joy of doing it. It's not a big deal. And that these things can both be true at the same time. It's a really big deal and it's not a big deal. And somehow it comes together to make what makes the game so special. It's a game, but it's a little bit more. It's something really powerful and intrinsic. Storytelling is part of who we are as people, but it's also just a goof, you know? And that's, I think, what in some ways the two opposing elements of it are what makes it so kind of potent.
Yeah. And it goes back to the thing that is my number one, I guess, mission anytime I get in front of a mic is that, and I know it's two words put together that people always put too much to, but as a content creator, and if you are listening to this and you are a dungeon master, you are a content creator because you're creating content for your table to consume. So everyone's a content creator in one way or another.
Sure.
But the most important thing to always hold on to is that when you create that content, it always has the chance to mean more to the person that's consuming it than you, the person that created it. And it's like you said, you have to hold on to this huge responsibility that is, but at the same time being like, they also might not care about it at all.
Right.
Like, and you have to be like, you're totally okay with like, oh, wow, I spent all this time on this thing and then we wanted to go left instead of right where I did all the work.
And anything that I did, they could not possibly have screwed it up more. Oh yeah, totally. But again, I think that's the joy of it is every plan survives until it actually makes contact with the enemy. You know what I mean? Like you can't railroad this thing as much as you would like to. Your players will always kind of squirm out of the edges and they're going to bring themselves into it. And the more you let them do that, the better the game it's going to be. So to sort of get back to that point, bringing new people into the hobby, I think is vibrant and important to what we do. I think the lifeblood of the next generation of gamers, but I don't think I think kids are obviously a massive part of that, but I think older players as well. I'm shocked at how much you can unlock from an adult player who has never had that kind of experience before. They've never been asked, yeah, sure, in a day they get to pick what they're going to drink at Starbucks, or they're going to decide if they want to take a slightly different route to work or whatever. But most of the day, they're kind of going through the motions of, well, this is my job. This is what I do. There are certain parameters to what it is to live the way a day-to-day kind of existence. And you say to them tonight, lives are on the line and treasure and glory is at your fingertips and you get to decide. And then the dice are going to elevate or destroy all your best, laid plans, and how much they can get into it because they've never had access to that kind of thing before. And that is a really, really special thing.
Yeah. And there is always a difficulty bringing in someone, regardless of if it's, I know this topic gets brought up with the concept of the video game generation and what can I do is often the question, and then breaking the brain a little to say, yeah, everything. And it's I often suggest having some examples.
Of course.
Phoenix Dawn Command is a really interesting game. It's by Keith Baker. It's this your character is like a deck that you're building. And then so you have a hand that you can always play out of. Sometimes your hand is better, sometimes it's worse, but you can always play out of it. But one of the things that they add is you have a card that's on there of things listed environmentally that you can utilize, and then you can mark it off. And one of the first things, it's like a big taxidermied bear. And so then if you use it, you'll get like a really notable mechanical bonus, but then it's gone. But like having things to usher that in for people to show kind of the concepts of like, okay, I can push that bear over on the monster and get this advantage or things like that. But once you start ushering in the idea that no, pretty much anything you can think up, we can just throw dice at it. And then we can figure out if that's what you can do. That's so fun to see someone's brain unlock the idea.
One of the things I've found is that that's where particularly games built on existing IP can be so powerful. So the simplest example I can use, tying back to what we were talking about before, is something like the Marvel, multiverse role-playing game is the current iteration, but any kind of Marvel superhero role-playing game of the past, everyone knows those characters, or now specifically with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they know them better than ever. So if you tell someone, oh, you're going to be playing a character and they go, well, how do I do it right? Or what should I do? Now you give them someone like Spider-Man, or you give them someone like Captain America, and you say, you are playing Captain America. What would Steve Rogers do in this situation? And suddenly they know he's got to say the big speech, or he's got to do the right thing, or he's got to self-sacrifice, and he's the Sentinel of Liberty and all this kind of stuff. And that can be a really powerful way to help them to understand. So then you can easily kind of push it over. And I'll do the same thing. I'll use the superhero kind of metaphors, even if they're making a D&D character. So if they're making a D&D character and they want to play a paladin, you're like, think about Steve Rogers, or think about, the thief character can be more like whatever, like Deadpool, or can be more like, Star-Lord or whatever. Like, so then you've got this entry point of, oh, right, I'm the jerk with a heart of gold, this kind of thing. Or, oh, I'm the fast talker. I'm the brute. I'm the, whatever. And suddenly it gives them an on-ramp to behavior that is, they can kind of literally play the role and get into that mode and understand, A, this is a lot of fun. B, they're still making decisions, but they don't feel like they're overwhelmed with every choice. Because you're like, well, you're the paladin. You're Captain America. What are you going to do in this situation? You're going to try and save people. You're going to defend the weak. You're going to stand up for what's right. Even within that choice, there's still hundreds of permutations of it. But now you've got a way to visualize and actualize what is the right choice given what you have in front of you,
Yeah. And the idea of someone getting the opportunity to say that they can do this all day. But so I actually ran the Marvel RPG at a convention, and I feel like you'll appreciate this maybe more than most, but I actually did it set in Neil Gaiman's 1602.
Oh, neat.
And then took some of the, made character sheets, took a little bit of the art and set it in that setting rather than just anything else.
The default.
But that was, a ton of fun. Cool. But it also goes back to even building out on that idea, asking people hey, what's a movie that you really love that you've recently seen, or is there a book series that you're super into? Mm-hmm. And so then if they say, literally, if it's Wheel of Time, if it's Lord of the Rings, or if it's I just, I watched Hunger Games and I loved all of those. Then you have these touch points that now they have touch points. And so then you can use all of those things, those characters, even if you don't. I listed several things right now that I definitely don't know. But even knowing that, if they say that, I can spend time on the internet to figure out what works for what they're doing.
Well, that exactly. Or character archetypes, right? So that idea of, the Wolverine's their favorite character. Okay, so you want this grim, badass, loner, mysterious, that kind of character concept, and just template it onto D&D or any other game that you're going to be playing and say, great, that's going to fulfill that kind of a role. Okay, we need these kinds of characters to also fill out this party, or this is the kind of story we're going to be making. Just giving people, something as simple as saying, okay, we're going to be playing in Ravenloft. You guys are going to be supernatural monster hunters. Who's going to fulfill different kinds of roles, whether that's the cleric or the knowledge, kind of the wizard or alchemist, or these kinds of things that you can then dig into and give them an area of expertise and give them a feeling of structure while still letting them make a bunch of choices.
Yeah. I know one of the other questions that I had is that where did we both start when we were the next gen? What was that like for you? I know that you mentioned, your brother bringing you into it, but like, was it just him stumbling into the books and bringing you along? Was it someone bringing him and then you?
I believe he played as part of his Boy Scout troop. I think they were on like a camping weekend and someone brought the books to the camping thing and they played. And then my brother and my older cousins got them. And I was the youngest out of that group. My older cousins were even older than my brother. And then there was my brother and there was me. And the reality is we couldn't do sports stuff together. I was tiny and scrawny, even if we were the same age. But then they were, 4, 5, 6 years older than me. There was no way. Even video games, they had better hand-eye coordination and patience for that stuff. But at the gaming table, on my turn, on my initiative, I get to tell you what I'm going to do. My dice rolls are as good as anyone else's. And if my ideas were good, if I had, either the best ideas or the most fun or, creative, I would have their attention. And that honestly, as a kid, was so empowering to me because it made me feel like the older boys, like that they had to listen to me and I could tell them something. And if I did a good job, that feedback loop was instantaneous. They were excited or they wanted to see the role come to life or, any of those kinds of things. Or if I blew their mind or I made them laugh or I did even something silly and just, caused chaos, there was that sense of entertainment that was being generated in real time. And so that was something that was just addictive to me as part of the game. And that I really, really wanted to do. Literally the very first session that I remember, this is, old Beckme D&D. So dwarf and elf are the characters. They're not just, so I made a dwarf and I called him Rolf because I think in the book it said examples of dwarf names and that was one of them. And so I just picked it out because, you want to do it right. And that's one of the ones there. And we did the village of Hamlet. And my brother didn't tell me. He told me the game was all about going into, caves and killing monsters and that we were these treasure hunters and all this stuff. He didn't fully explain to me that the village was not monsters, like it was a regular village. So I just started going through town. My brother didn't describe things at all properly. And I ended up creaming a bunch of regular people. And then my brother was like, "Oh, you're a bad guy." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And we had a big argument about it. And I was like, "We have to start over again because I'm a good guy, not a bad guy," stuff like this. Like it was just such classic, disconnect between the narrative and the description and what was really happening. But that idea even of cause and effect, I think was really, really potent. That idea of, oh my gosh, I can kick down that door. I can run away from these people. I can steal their stuff. And I think there's, again, people joke about the murder hobo kind of stuff that people do with their characters. I think it comes from a deep-seated, it's like the people playing Grand Theft Auto and they're like running cars off the road and shooting stuff and blowing up buildings and all that because there's this weird feeling of, well, I could never get away with this in the real world. And it's not that every single one of us is a psychopath. It's this weird idea of, I want to push the limits to see what's possible. I want to take the structure of this thing and push it to the breaking point and see what's possible. And that's, I think there's something weirdly joyous about it. Not that you always want to have that at your table, but there is still that element of, yeah, but what if we just lit it all on fire? Like what if, when you're in the movie and you're like, just shoot the bad guy, just shoot him. He's clearly the bad guy. You should shoot him. And the first time you're playing a D&D game and the evil overlord starts to do his monologue and someone just pulls out a bow and fires an arrow in his face. And you're like, yes, we can do the thing that we always say we should have done, in the movie or in the TV show or in the whatever, so.
It always makes me think, even as a child, I was like, why are you letting these people turn into the Megazord? Go over and kick him. Kick him now. This is the perfect opportunity as a villain to kick him. You're already big. Don't let them get big. Kick them right now.
But I think that's one of the what's great about the role-playing games is you can like indulge these ideas, right? Or the game master has to kind of like think outside the box and kind of go, okay, if we're going to pull off this kind of moment, what are we really going to do in order to make this, work? Which I think can be fun too. And it's the spontaneity of that, the improvness of that, I think is really, really special in its own way.
Yeah. And then Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh is my introduction.
That was one of our. That was the first one you played that we had. Those. We loved that 3 module series.
The U series.
That's the Danger at Dunwater and then the Final Enemy. And we loved those modules. They were so good. And it's funny, years later, people are like, oh, it's got a Scooby-Doo, style plot because they weren't really ghosts. It wasn't really a haunted castle or a haunted house. It was just a bunch of smugglers. And you're like, yeah, but it was awesome. Like, it was just fun. And there's a pirate ship and you can sneaking aboard the pirate ship was one of the most, the Sea Ghost. That was like one of my most favorite memories in that module. It's so good.
Yeah. And the person who ran it for me, because I was just with them, they made an entire party for me. And I ran the whole party because the concept was trying to find what I enjoyed about D&D. And then at that point, I actually ran a solo campaign where it was just me as one character, as an elven ranger for a while. And then I played a dwarven fighter. And I can see him right here. I have my first mini that I ever had. That
amazing.
Was mine, as a dwarven fighter. Then I joined like their table from that point on. But it was, second edition was, my math skills definitely got a lot better by jumping into D&D.
Good old Thaco, baby.
Oh, yeah. And it's just like everything else. If you just learn it and then someone holds your hand along the way, then because they already know it, it's like second nature.
But so much of it, even though there were the rule books, every table had its own house rules, even if they didn't know they were house rolling it. Mm-hmm. Like we had the second edition books, but because it just in our minds felt like reorganized first edition, and a lot of it was. We skimmed over whole rule sections. We didn't use the speed factors or any of that kind of stuff that was in second ed. We were like, oh yeah, we know these things back and forth, And it wasn't until years later, I'm actually reading through stuff and I go, we never did that. We never did half this stuff that was in here. We were just kind of winging it at the table most of the time.
Oh yeah. Now my favorite one is for 5th edition. Technically when 2 people roll the same initiative, this dexterity has nothing to do with it.
Right.
If it's 2 players, you let them decide. And if it's a player and one of the monsters, the DM decides. That's what's in the book. And that hurt my brain so bad.
Sure. But on the other hand, is the table, is the narrative moving forward? Are we all in agreement? Is everything okay? Great. Keep going. And that's one of those things that I think as kids, the rule books were like, the safety net of no, you can't do that because in this it says dispel magic or whatever. And then growing older, you just realize, no, we can just communicate as adults and I can say, hey, that's going to ruin the game. Like, let's roll things back or let's, negotiate or talk about this like adults. Like, I appreciate that you want to light this village on fire, but as funny as that may be, maybe we should not do that for the sake of everyone else's game for the next, 4 hours or whatever may have you.
You know what? I feel like we are in a day and age where we are afforded an off ramp for this that we have not had before and be like, in a multiverse that happened. It's not this one. Sure. And so imagine, if you will, this branch over here where you did, in fact, set the village on fire. Good for you. So here in the main timeline, no.
It is so amazing that in mainstream entertainment, like my mother knows what multiverses are. She also knows who Rocket Raccoon and Groot are, which, when I was growing up were 2 stupidly obscure Marvel characters. So we live in a very nerdy age that is, we take for granted. That's for sure.
Yeah, but this all is a perfect segue because we were talking about like deep into the weeds, which the Young Adventurer guides are not. And my children read them, and my daughter has actually, and I don't think I've mentioned this to you yet, but I'll mention it now. She has actually I did mention it. She uses them as like reference guides.
Amazing.
Like she'll pull them off the shelf and think, they're also they're labeled very well to just be like, oh, I'm looking for this thing. So she pulls them off as reference guides for her. Whereas, they're giant shelves behind me full of books and sagging shelves that I have to go through tome by tome. But for her, she's pulling those off when she's thinking about characters or she's thinking about stories or things like that. But one of the things about it is the goal from my outside looking in perspective is that it's trying to titrate all of these things that we've been talking about into a format that is more digestible. And it doesn't matter about age. I enjoy reading the books because I'm like, oh, cool. I can just read this and get the information that I wanted without going through the tomes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always meant to be narrative first. It's always meant to be about cool story choices or memorable things. There's so much artwork and there's visual. And although there is an order to them, you can kind of flip it open to any page and just go, oh yeah, that's really neat. Or that it tries to be a story generator or an idea generator or like a momentum builder that any of the things you're looking at, things like on any of the creatures, the do this, don't do that. Like it's the here are some strategic things to keep in mind when you're interacting with these creatures. You don't have to do any of this stuff, but it can help lead you down, choices and behaviors that can generate more entertainment as you go. What's been really satisfying for us is that, the books have been around long enough and we've got, they're, for lack of a better term, they're kind of edition agnostic in the sense, yes, they do reflect current 5th edition D&D, but they're just also sort of universal. They're talking about broader concepts around character, concepts in the worlds and the kinds of adventuring that we've been doing for the past 50 years. It just gives it to you in this very digestible format. And that's been really fun. And now we've got the new bind ups, right? So we've got the Warriors and Wizards Compendium, which essentially takes all the character creation stuff, puts it all into one book. And then we've got the Monsters and Creatures Compendium, which takes all the monster stuff from all the monster books. Yeah. So it just makes it, again, this nice package that people can just kind of pull off the shelf and go, I'm going to make a character. And it's not about strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma. It's about what is this idea? And then we'll put statistics to it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And this goes back to teaching the next gen because while I was brought in during 2nd edition, I guess this is another interesting question that I didn't have written down. So prepare yourself. So, hey, we're back to surprise question.
It's all good.
Surprise for myself and you as well. Do you remember kind of the first time you were bringing someone in? Because I remember that for 3rd edition and it was a little bit deeper in. And like, it was such a heavy lift. I mean, the joke that I would often make is, especially once you got into like the 3-5 days, which I mean, we're getting into the 5-5 days. But like the idea was like, oh, hi, did you come to the table with your thesis?
Right.
Because you would like, oh, you would literally have references because depending on how far you'd gone. And so like so much.
Yeah. Yeah. We one of the first people I remember trying to teach it to hilariously, and this is a great anecdote, because of the satanic panic, it was hitting all the talk shows and all that stuff. My mom took away our D&D books because she was convinced this might be occult material. And so we finally convinced my dad to try the game. So we sat down with him, and my 12-year-old brother is trying to explain how the game works to my dad. My dad's a high school teacher. He's a very intelligent man. But, making a character, we don't have pre-generated characters. We don't have photocopied character sheets. We are handwriting out every statistic and every stat and attribute. And my brother doesn't know or understand a quick way to do that. Making a character is an hour to an hour and a half long process. And so my dad, like his eyes are just glazing over because this looks like accounting because there's just so many numbers and stupid statistics and all these things that my dad is figuring out. We're rolling the dice randomly. We're not making a well-kitted character. Finally, my dad spends like probably 90 minutes making a character, and it's 1st edition AD&D. My brother also would painfully go through the rules. You couldn't just show up at the mouth of the dungeon because that would be too easy. So he would have people travel overland, and he would roll weather tables, and then he would roll random encounters. And my dad took cover from the rain in a cave, and a giant spider attacked him and killed him. And so there he was, 90 minutes making a character. And I think he played for half an hour and he just gets iced.
Yeah.
And my dad is so mad. And my brother and I are howling with laughter because that's how the game works. It was like the randomness of it. It was like life, sometimes a thunderstorm happens. Sometimes a bear eats you. Like that's the way the game works. And we kind of reveled in the insanity and the chaos of that. It wasn't going to be the perfect fantasy story. Sometimes the poison needle hits you and your guy dies gibbering on the floor. But if you can win despite all these challenges, that was kind of the joy in it. The good thing is my dad realizes, hey, this isn't satanic. He actually tells my mother, she goes, Joe, is it evil? And my dad goes, no, it's not evil. It's just dumb. They just like sit around rolling dice and being goofballs. And they're using a lot of math and they're staying out of trouble. Just give them the damn books back,
That's awesome. Yeah. And then, I mean, it actually came up on the one of the previous episodes, but the person that brought me into Dungeons and Dragons was an ordained pastor.
Oh, wow.
And so, my foundation is that the game is exactly what you make it.
Exactly.
So if you want it to be satanic and as evil as possible, sure. Yeah, super. You can do it all the time. If you don't,
right.
Everything. Yeah.
But that's true of anything, right? Like,
yeah.
We all decided there are rules for how you should drive a car. Can you drive in the opposing lane and run people down? Yes. Yes, you can. If you have the steering wheel in your hands, you have the choice to be able to do that, right? Like,
this is the thing I think about way more than I let on. I think about this all the time.
What?
That we are all just
into traffic?
No, just that we were all agreeing to do this thing the right way. And then if anyone just has a wild hair, they can just choose not to.
But, and like we were sort of talking about before with projecting and with stuff like that. And I mentioned that some people go murder hobo because there is this weird sort of exploratory idea of, oh, sure, you told me I have to listen to the city guards, but you also told me in this game I can do anything. So I'm going to punch that guy. I'm going to mouth off. I'm going to, cause trouble in this container where that will never go outside that container. Do you know what I mean? Like I can be the monster. I can be the troublemaker. I can be the whatever, defiant of authority and see how far it gets me. And sometimes maybe I might even succeed. And I think there's a joyous kind of anarchy that can take hold of the game within certain agreeable kind of limits that is okay, that can be kind of fun as long as everyone at the table is getting something out of it.
I mean, anymore as a player, and listeners know I am on the verge of an NPC. I'm just so happy just to be on the other side of the screen.
Sure.
I've gotten better about it, just to be more engaging, but there was a long time where I was just so excited, just to be on the other side, not having to run the game, or I'm just like, great. I love
whatever. Yeah. Do you know what? It's sort of the opposite of that has happened. I taught a bunch of people in college how to play D&D. And again, they'd never experienced this before. They'd heard about it, but they'd never played the game. And because we are entrenched and we've been playing this for, at that point, over a decade of the game, we had built certain expectations. Okay, you go into the dungeon and you kill the monsters and you get treasure and you get XP and all this sort of stuff. And playing with these people who had no precepts of what role-playing games had to be or what that structure or what that gameplay loop was, that was an amazing experience for me and for them because they would negotiate with everything. They were scared of getting into a fight. They understood we only have a very small pool of hit points. Man, I could only maybe get hit once, twice, 3 times, and I'm probably down. So every fight was like, do we really need a fight? Is there a way we can avoid this? Can we sneak? Can we, parlay? Can we trick people? Stuff like that. And I was fascinated that they were avoiding combat at all costs. It was so built into my brain that you go from room to room and you complete these encounters, usually through killing creatures, right? We get to an area, there were, multiple forks in the tunnel. They go into these caves and there's a huge pool of essentially green slime. And they don't know what that stuff is. I'm just describing the noxious fumes and I'm describing the misting in the air. And they take a stick and they stick it in this green slime and it starts to melt. And they're like, well, that's a death drop. We're not going past there. And they just literally never went down that tunnel. They go back the other way. And you're in your head, you're like, well, it's a first level adventure. I wouldn't kill you. they don't know that. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? They don't know that this thing's not that bad and they can light it on fire and continue on their way. As far as they were concerned, that is complete death. You know what I mean? And I'm laughing, but I'm also kind of like, yeah, if you and I were in a cave and we went down one tunnel and we saw what looked to be a gigantic pool of acid, you're not going to be like, all right, what if I can jump it? You know what I mean? You're going to be like,
Nope.
no way, man. I am not risking my life or limb for this kind of thing. And so they treated every encounter in some ways with more gravity because they weren't looking at it statistically. They weren't looking at it within the scope of the rules or the precepts of what D&D should be or what, typically is structurally. They were just like, everything was dangerous. Everything was risky. Everything was a big deal. And that was a joy also to kind of be reminded of that vibrant discovery part of new people coming to the table, that they can bring their honesty to the experience in a way that you can sort of lose track of because you're sort of like in your head already doing a character build and you're like thinking about how you're going to, well, once we get fireball, we can do this. And our average damage output is that. And here's the best strategy for whatever, this kind of thing. It was like just them purely responding to it as characters. That was so much fun.
Yeah. And it's one of the most interesting things for me is having people that, the broadest brush I can paint with is new voices that enter the hobby. That's the most interesting thing for me,
for sure.
Because, you and I have both been involved in the hobby for a really long time. Cumulatively, it gets real long. But the idea that like having those new voices and like even my own children, like I know for the most part, like a lot of the things that have influenced like their imagination, and I have a lot to do with that. And I have a lot that is shared, but there are also a lot of things that that are not shared because, they're going to school and
sure.
They have their own friend group and they have things that they're watching that I'm not sitting down with the whole time. And
right.
There are all these influences that they have personally that I still am not 100% involved with. So like watching them bring those things to the table and I get to experience those for the first time. The other one that like I'm really like want to go back to a little bit is because you sparked a memory for me is almost reintroducing the previous generation because I ran a game for someone and it went amazing, a fantastic game. And, everyone was, afterwards like, oh, yeah, but great. And only to find out that one person had not played for 20 years.
Yeah.
And he could have told me that he hadn't played for 20 hours.
Right.
And just to reignite that spark in someone is also so much fun. And also to have those two merge, because the other thing that you hit on that I think is really, really important is that like imagination is one of the great like equalizers, because like you said, it's not that there's not this huge skill-based thing that we're doing here.
Right.
Like you have an imagination. I'd like your opinion on the scenario that we've all found ourselves in. What would your character like to do in this scenario? Roll the D20 like everybody else is going to do. There's a 20.
Yep. I've done now 2 rounds of 3 rounds, but over 2 trips. I did D&D in a castle, which is that deluxe vacation package. You go to England and you literally are playing D&D in a castle. I was one of the celebrity dungeon masters, which saying that out loud is insane. But in running for this group of 6 people over the course of 4 days, we're going to do at least 24 hours worth of D&D, right? So it's like usually 8 hours a day, plus there's a prelude and a post-mortem kind of thing for the game. And they do other events and things around the castle as well. But the majority of the time they're there, what they're paying for is this uninterrupted escapism, that we are all at the table in a way that I had not had that kind of ultra dedicated gaming time and escapist space since probably college, because the real world always intrudes in our day-to-day life where you got to think about, well, what am I making for dinner? Or, what do we got to do? And here it's like all your meals are included and you've got this beautiful space and they've got terrain and lighting and music and just game. Like we are getting into character and we're going to do this thing. And it's amazing how fast you can move through that airlock and kind of be in this other space. And the first day is always a little bit trepidatious because in many cases, these players don't know each other. Like maybe they're in couples, or I had one group that was 3 people who play together and then 3 complete strangers they'd never met before. So that first day, start feeling out the table. What are we all like? And what are we, we're all here dedicated to this, campaign that we're doing over the next 4 days. But what does that entail? And what is your role within this group? And then once they hit that, man, oh man, there's this like day 2 turbocharged, like you don't have to remind people what we did last session. It was yesterday. It's still, the miniatures are still on the table. The cliffhanger is literally right there. And we just dive back into it. And to see those people, and these are in some cases experienced players, in some cases not, but they've got this deep desire to escape into the story that you're trying to weave for them. And the only thing you need to do is kind of hold on tight, because the momentum at the table is phenomenal. And I had one group of longtime gamers. They were a little bit older than me, these 3 guys from St. Louis, and they were highly strategic. You know what I mean? They knew the rules really well, and they knew how to make their characters really powerful. But the one guy was like a theater guy, wanting to break out. And his table at home, they would never talk in the character voice. It was always that third person kind of description. Well, I'm going to tell this guy that he's got the wrong idea, like let's make a diplomacy check, or, like that kind of thing. Like they wanted to, and this guy wanted to role play, but the group, that's not how they did their D&D. You know what I mean? And immediately at the table, I'm doing first person, whatever. And I'm in character and the NPCs, and the other people at the table are doing the voices. And this guy's getting into it. And you can see his friends are like, what is this? Like they just didn't expect to see that from him. And then I was sort of putting the olive branch out to them and giving them little scenes and, setting up these dramatic moments. And over the course of those 3 days, they're getting into it and they're enjoying it more. And probably one of the best compliments that I got was, I stay in touch with them even now. And that dude messaged me and he said, "You've permanently changed our home game. Like we're doing the dramatic stuff now at home that I didn't feel like we could, and you're just like, that is cool that we've had this really powerful effect on their, game going forward."
Yeah, because that same guy that got me into it, we would go up to his uncle's house. It's always a fun thing where his uncle was like basically the same age as him kind of thing. But we'd go up there because I live in Central California. We drive up to San Jose. And I remember a couple times, or at least one time, I distinctly remember going into that house and 3 days later exiting that house.
Right.
And I never, usually we would try and plan out like a See the Sun, go to like a Fry's, which is like a big computer place, or like one of the local game stores, or just a reason to go
but most
to
of
the
it
outside.
Was just locked in.
Yeah,
right?
just locked in.
It was such a cool feeling. In high school, we would do like Friday night, we'd do like a sleepover at one of my buddies' place. And it would just be gaming until people were falling asleep at the table. Like people were literally losing track because they're so exhausted. We would all crash out in sleeping bags, wake up the next morning, have just like quick breakfast, and then back into it, and all day Saturday. And then if I could beg my parents to stay through to Sunday, and they would just be like, "Oh, is that my buddy Chris's place?" They're like, "I think Chris's family's sick of you being there." They're like, "No, we're doing our own thing. Like we're off in our own."
They don't even know we're here.
Yeah. Order a pizza and we're just doing the thing. Don't worry about us. And it was just the funniest. My mom was just exasperated. Like, how can you keep doing the same thing for so long? And you're like, because it's not the same thing. Because we're making progress and we're doing cool stuff, and it's always exciting and something mysterious around every corner. That's how.
And I think it goes back to like, I think there's something so important about like bringing the next generation in to like keep revitalizing the generations that are here, because like that fervor that happens, like, the same fervor that I experienced when someone showed back up 20 years later. Like I said, I even right now still have this very weird feeling of like, I know he's not lying to me. I know he did not lie to me, but I still feel like he lied to me, because I'm like, there's no way the last time you played was 2 decades before this session. You were all the way in.
But that's what's so great about it. I know it taps into something really fundamental in all of us. And if you can get people to see that or reignite that, I think that's really, really powerful and special. And There's just nothing else like it. Even obviously I'm a huge comic book guy and I work in comics and the majority of my work is comic book work. But you go to a Comic-Con and you're signing books for people and you are talking about things you like, storylines, and people will bring people over and say, you got to read this book, or man, this is my favorite, or whatever. You are tapping into something really cool. But you go to a gaming convention and it's not just you need to read this thing or try this thing. It's we're going to bring you into it and we're going to have an experience together. And being at the table together changes. You will do a demo with some group of people, or you'll do a short session with a group of people. The next day you have a different bond than you did before. You know what I mean? You are linked in some fascinating kind of way. You are now, remember that time we were in danger and we did stuff. And I don't know, there's just something so cool about that. The memories of that you cannot properly explain to other people if they haven't done it,
Yeah. So one of the other pieces we have is that should be very interesting for this one. We always have a air quote homework section. I always frame it that way because it's super fun. But anything that we can think that suggest that people read, watch, or just engage with media wise as demonstrations for these kind of things. I would suggest Young Adventurers guides. Surprise. Sure. But yeah.
Other kind of stuff, other things that people should dig into. That's a good kind of question. I think for me, one of the things that I find really potent as a storytelling device is to watch a movie or watch a TV show, and in the back of my mind being like, what if a different decision was made? It's almost like a role-playing exercise for me. And when I'm writing other characters, I'm constantly trying to get into character. If I'm writing Conan, I don't want Conan to have my voice. Conan the Barbarian has his own voice and his own desires and needs. I'm trying to think about what is a Conan response to this situation. You know what I mean? What is the only thing that he would do in this particular moment? That is a really potent, kind of amazing thing to be able to unlock. And it's a compliment that I get where people are like, man, I love when you're writing whatever, the Avengers or Thunderbolts or those, characters, champions, because the characters felt like they were doing things that were right to them, or when they said stuff, it was in the voice that I expect to hear from them instead of it. Some writers, I think, can overwhelm with their own voice, they're forcing these characters. They're putting the campaign on rails, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? And I love getting into character, whether that's building scenarios for these stories that I'm writing or figuring out the best kind of pathway forward. So rather than a homework assignment where it's like, you must watch this thing or read this book, I think it's almost like a state of mind. Like I want you to sort of open yourself up to watching a particular piece of media or your favorite TV show, or take one character from one thing and sort of imagine them in a different scenario. How are they responding to what's going on? Your character that you play in your campaign, or a favorite character that you want to kind of explore.
You know what? I'll layer on, especially if you've gotten, going a little bit back to something I had mentioned before. If you have something that a player has suggested as like one of their favorite pieces of media, like I said, I mentioned several things that I have no touch points at all. Like I've not actually read the Wheel of Time series, basically because that's overwhelming. And
those are doorstops. They're massive.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay. So there's that many. I can't. The other one is like I've not read the Hunger Games either. That's manageable for me. So like if someone had mentioned like, oh, I love the Hunger Games, I would sit down, watch the Hunger Games, but the way you're talking about.
Right. With an open mind of what is this the bigger structure, or what is the archetype, or what is how are these characters responding to a thing, or how am I taking characters from one media and kind of plugging it into another? I find those really, really helpful. Or if I watch a movie or a TV show, that thing we were talking about before, like, why don't they shoot the villain? Do you know what I mean? Or why aren't they doing the thing that I think is so obvious? Then that almost makes me kind of retroactively start to build a different story where I go, well, what if you did shoot the villain? Or what if you were, able to make that choice? Can I create a situation, or can I create a different story out of those same ingredients? So all of a sudden you're doing a different kind of, you're using that as inspiration. But by the time you're done with it, it's a completely different story, sometimes in a different genre entirely.
Yeah, and that's another piece of advice that I think I've given before, but I think it really applies well here, is branch out. Branch out into a genre that you're not necessarily comfortable with, and let that flow over you. It may not be something you enjoy, and you may solidify your lack of enjoyment. And that's totally okay. But like in doing so, like you're still learning something.
Totally.
I often also give the piece of advice: read a book from start to finish, because that's the way it was intended to be read. You're going to get something out of it. No matter what, you're going to gain something from that process.
I think it's amazing too, in the back of the Dungeon Master's Guides, one of the appendices that Gary Gygax puts together is all of his favorite books and other inspirational material that feeds into what made D&D. And so that is like the novels and the poetry, and obviously Tolkien's in there and Robert E. Howard's in there and all those kinds of things. And that stuff it's amazing to go back and realize when they talk about Vancian magic, that's because the Vance, fantasy novels that he was reading has that specific fire and forget style of magic. When you cast a spell, the symbols and the sigils and the words vanish from your mind. And that's when the way he wanted the magic in D&D to work, or whatever it might be, that you're able to look and go, oh, if you dig into one of those books, you'll see the DNA that made Dungeons and Dragons what it is. Like when you read the original Conan short stories from Weird Tales, and you see these morally dubious troublemakers hunting, through areas for treasure, or coming across rituals they don't fully understand, and then having to deal with the permutations of it. That is so intrinsically sword and sorcery, but it's also such a key pillar to what made D&D feel the way it did,
Yeah. So that's Appendix N. Which reminds me of a book that was in arm's reach entitled Appendix N.
I have it as well. That's funny. Yeah. I've got one downstairs. It's a really cool book.
Yeah. The absolute must read. This is a thing that I do personally. Man, I don't. So 300 episodes in, listeners, you probably know more about what I've said than I do. So what I often do when I go into used bookstores, like I assume we all do, right? Mm-hmm. The second you get into a town, you search like, where's a used bookstore near me? And then you go in. I pull the list of Appendix N authors. Nice. And then I go look for their work that was not listed in Appendix N.
Oh, cool. That's fun.
And then I try and find something from them. And then I buy it and then I read it. Because like if a piece inspired them, I assume the rest of their work can be inspirational as well. So that's a little something as well.
Very cool.
Of course, where can people go on this World Wide Web to keep up to date on everything you're doing?
I've had my own website for 27 years, so pretty easy to find. Just jimzub.com, JIMZUB.com. That's got all my books, all my material that I put together, tutorials on how to write stories and how I broke into comics and how to work with editors and artists and all that kind of stuff. But it's also got listing of my upcoming books. I have a newsletter called the Zubstack that people can like and subscribe, and they can follow along with my adventures and all my trips and stuff I'm working on.
The fact that Substack came out, perfect.
Perfect.
Just turn that S around. That's right. Good to go. And we'll have links to that in the show note. And you know what? I'm going to say this with the utmost confidence. We will not wait this long to get back on the show.
That would be great. Yeah, let's chat again.
We just want to thank Jim again for coming on, spending some time with us, talking about the Young Adventurers Guides, Conan, Skull Kickers, and all things D&D, and bringing that next generation in. And of course, if you want to tell us about how you brought the next generation in, or how you were the last generation and how you were brought in, then you can always email us at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com, and we would absolutely love to hear about it. And of course, if you see fit, you can go to your Apple Podcast or your podcatcher of choice, leave us a rating and review, because it'll make us smile. And there's that guy, his first name Al, last name Garithim, and he is always out to get us. I don't know. And of course, if you want to head over to social media, you can typically find us at DMS_block. That's at DMsBlock. And of course, as always, we are a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like The Bad Venture Club, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, and more. But as always, thank you for listening to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing gods, killing characters, and lowering the ego scores of everyone else at the table. I'm DM Neal. Good night, good luck, and keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
No one is too young to be the next generation. If you think about it, a crib is like a giant dice tray.
Goodbye.